We're in an era of college football where conference expansion is impacting all of the Power Five conferences. Should the Ohio State Buckeyes encourage the Big Ten Conference to continue to expand? I have an answer for you today on Locked On Buckeyes.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Buckeyes for the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Wednesday, June 28th in the year 2023, and I want to thank you for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen or first watch of every single day. During this episode, I will go over schools the Big Ten should target in expansion and a new segment I want to call Get to Know the Host. But first, conference expansion is back. It's hitting the Ohio State football team. It's impacting the Big Ten Conference, and it's impacting all of the Power 5 conferences in college football. Now, I could go different ways with this topic of expansion, but this one comes to my mind, and it's really important to the Ohio State football team. Should the Buckeyes encourage the Big Ten to continue to expand? And I was thinking about doing a pros and cons or comparing and contrasting this topic, but I don't want to go down that road. I don't want to, maybe that happens another day here on the show, but ultimately I think they should, because I do believe expanding the conference raises the competitive nature of the football games on Saturdays. Because if you look at it, any schedule, any season, you got Michigan, you got Penn State. Those are the two teams you're playing. Well, previous way, those are the two teams you're playing every single year. And what are you going to, two of the best teams you're going to play every single year? Michigan State's up and down. Wisconsin's not always there. Iowa, okay, they have an elite defense. Offense is subpar. So you're kind of getting the gist of Ohio State is a school that might want to play more competitive games in October and November to prepare them for the playoff, especially as it's going to be an expanded playoff. More of those hostile or intense environments, more of those grueling four-quarter matches and battles you have in September, October, November, those will help better prepare you for the expanded playoff, the 12-team playoff, and the national championship in January. Keep this in mind as well. One thing I have realized as I've looked at expansion, looked at conference realignment and all of those things, this has been going on consistently every time there is a new way to find a national champion. Bowl Coalition, Bowl Alliance in the 90s. You see, as soon as they started to say, oh, we're going to try to figure out a national championship game, Penn State goes to the Big Ten. Miami gets to a conference. Florida State goes to a conference. You're having a lot of independents back then in the 80s and even early 90s. Those schools have been in conferences. Now, Miami was in the Big East. That folded. Now they're in the ACC. But you get the picture. That was in the 90s. Now, when you bring on the BCS, go to the late 90s, you're going to see more changing of the conferences and conference realignment. Now, middle 2000s, they added another game to the BCS. Originally, it was 4 games. Then it was 4+1, 4 BCS bowls, and then the national championship game. So that was a little bit different. Not so much of a new format in the BCS, but adding another game to the schedule. Okay, great. I'm here for it. But the moment they went to saying, oh, we're going to have a playoff, Nebraska comes to the Big Ten. And I thought Nebraska was fine to the Big 12. I think Nebraska even still currently would be fine to the Big 12. But they came to the Big Ten, thought it'd be a better opportunity for them to make the playoff, win a national championship. And so I do think Ohio State's in a very interesting situation because they consistently have the best roster in the conference. I'm not going to say they consistently have the best team, but I think top to bottom, you can say they consistently have the best roster in the conference. So why in the world should they push for expansion if they have the best roster? You see what happens when they have an elite roster, and the roster is not the best 11 are not on the field all at the same time, offense or defense. We see what happens. things need to change. You need to alter some things to better help yourselves during the season so that when you play a Clemson or when you play a Georgia, you're better prepared for them because of some battles and tests you endured during the months of September, October, and November. There's a negative side to this as well. If you end up going out and expanding, and let's say they don't bring in the right schools, let's say they go out and bring in a Kansas or Missouri. This is a football-centered conversation. Missouri, okay, I don't think basketball or football when I think of Missouri. I think of football, but not good football. When it comes to Kansas, I think of basketball, which I think Kansas and Big Ten, that would be great for the conference. But for the football conversation, I am not trying to go out there and get Kansas to come to the football to come to play football in the Big Ten. That's how I look at it. Now, if you're trying to go outside of the geographically and outside of the footprint of the old Big Ten, yeah, you may want to say, yeah, go out there and do that. Go out there and get people on the West Coast, which also helps you with travel. And so there's numerous ways that the Buckeyes, that they push for Big Ten expansion, it helps them. It better helps them be prepared for the playoff, especially in an expanded variety, a 12-team format. The Buckeyes could play a home game, another game, and another game. Now, I'm saying it that way because more and more and more football, if you don't go through tough battles in the regular season, you might not be as prepared as you need to be for the gauntlet at the end of the season. I do believe the Buckeyes are really one of those teams that if they want it, if they push for it, they might get schools to come to the conference that help them be better in the regular season and be better prepared for the playoff. But it's very strategic. You have to make sure you're going out and getting the right football programs and bringing them in. Now, in regards to Nebraska, if Ohio State back then, I believe it was 2012, 2011, 2010 when Nebraska came in. I don't know the exact year, but I think Ohio State would have said, okay, cool. Like the Big Ten is a conference, good football, not the best football, but good football. But bringing Nebraska in will drastically improve the play in the conference. So I think back then at that time, that's great. So you have to remember how things are when you are pursuing a school and that school is accepted to the Big Ten. That might not be how things go in regards to how they are when they join the conference. So some things are to better prepare you for the playoff. Some things are simply recruiting. If Ohio State ordered the Miami Hurricanes to come to the Big Ten and Miami got out of the ACC and came to the Big Ten, you know what that does? Helps the Buckeyes in recruiting. Because now there are some of those South Florida kids who want to take an unofficial visit to Ohio State, but may not have the funds to do so, getting a plane ride and all of that jazz that goes into it. All of a sudden, they can go down there, South Florida, Miami Hurricanes, Ohio State on a Saturday evening. And what do? You get another opportunity for that kid to come to a game. May not be an unofficial visit for Ohio State, but you get another time for that kid to be there, be in the stadium, and see the Buckeyes play. So it not only helps you with the playoff, it can help you with the expansion, of recruiting, but you got to get the right schools in. Like I said, Missouri and Kansas don't really help Ohio State in recruiting. Texas and Oklahoma, if they were to come to the Big Ten, they help the Buckeyes in recruiting. Now we're getting a bigger picture about why the Buckeyes should push for the Big Ten to expand. But who are some schools that the Buckeyes should encourage the Big Ten to pursue when it comes to conference expansion? I have a few on my list. I'll go over them next here on Locked On Buckeyes. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to join the fun. So don't miss your chance to snag a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball trademarks used with permission. Thanks for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen every single day. Now is the perfect time to go ahead and subscribe to Locked On Buckeyes on Apple or Spotify or the Odyssey app or YouTube or wherever you get your fine podcasts. If you're an Apple or Spotify listener, leave a 5-star review and a rating. If you watch the show on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and hit the like button on this video. Locked On Buckeyes is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Expansion is one thing that I am occasionally not the fondest of. I am one that's more of an old school mind, and I like the geographic nature of the conferences. The Big 12 is in the South. West Virginia, Big 12 don't make no sense to me. ACC, Atlantic Coast, that makes sense. Cincinnati, Big 12, don't make sense to me. SEC, Southeastern Conference. It's literally in the name of the conference. Texas and Oklahoma don't make sense to me. Pac-12, Pacific. Okay, cool. That makes sense to me. But then you got two of the best schools, best programs, best brands in the conference going to the Big Ten, which was at one time a Midwest conference, but that went away a long time ago. I prefer the geographic nature of conferences. It's an easier way to cultivate and build rivalries, and it's an easier way for just the competitive nature of the conference. Geographically, things make sense. But when it comes to Ohio State and potentially encouraging the Big Ten to pursue certain schools, who should the Buckeyes encourage the Big Ten to target? And I only say this because I understand Gene Smith has certain pull with the Big Ten. One of the most recognizable faces amongst all the athletic directors in the Big Ten Conference. Even if you go out to USC or UCLA, I think Gene Smith is probably one of the most recognizable athletic directors, not just in the conference, but even in the entire country, which is why it makes sense for him to maybe exercise his muscle and use his influence and possibly his power to encourage the conference to go out and pursue this school or that school. But as we know, and I'm going to keep it in the context of the Big Ten, the current branding and format of the conference, you're going to go out west, you're going to go east. So I literally have schools from coast to coast that I do believe the Ohio State Buckeyes should possibly say, hey, football-wise, you bring them in. It raises the level of competitiveness in the conference, and it also helps us be better prepared for the playoff. I think when you go out west, it's very easy. These schools have been rumored to come to the Big Ten. I think at some point they will, maybe over the next year and a half to 2 years. Washington and Oregon. Now, you may say, Jay, Oregon, decent football program, not an elite football program, decent football program. Washington, decent football program. Oregon's been to a national championship more recent than Washington. Washington won a natty, I do believe, in the 90s. And so you're getting two schools that they're not going to be getting the buzz, preseason hype that in Ohio State, Penn State, the team up north, Alabama, Georgia, USC. They're not going to get that preseason hype. But if you talk about like the next tier and you have maybe 15 schools in your next tier, I think you could probably put Washington or Oregon there in that conversation. Which why when it comes to football, it just makes sense. Also, they love their football out there in the Pacific Northwest. Also, Phil Knight money is different. The owner of Nike, that's all I got to say. When I think about Phil Knight and him coming to a conference, Phil Knight money is different. That drastically improves things for the Big Ten Conference. I'm not really going to go out west anymore. I'm not going to go BYU. I'm not going to go Utah. You already got USC and UCLA. I don't really care to bring Cal and Stanford to the Big Ten. I understand academically Stanford fits. Your boy don't care. I'm not really going to go down that rabbit hole. Just going to say I am not really too fond of saying for a football conversation, Stanford, Cal, come to the Big Ten. No, don't care. Don't care at all. But when it comes to moving further east, now I'm not going to come too far east, but coming further east, you got to think. You kind of have to think, does the Big Ten want to pull or try to get the services of a Kansas or a Missouri? This isn't me saying this is what they should do. I think geographically, and it definitely helps Nebraska to have Missouri in Kansas. in the Big Ten. But I do want to stop right there and say, if you want a team that could just have more of a good fan base, solid fan base, a fan base that's good, Iowa State. I mean, if you realistically want to bring in two schools from right there, Kansas State, Iowa State, I think those are realistic schools. They're not rivals. No, they're not. They happen to be in the same conference, but they're not rivals. What do? They bring a fun brand of football. They bring a football that is getting better. They bring a football that I think Big Ten fans will enjoy. And it does do some things to Ohio State's schedule as far as making the strength of schedule a little bit better. IU, Purdue, Illinois, Northwestern, trash. Bring people in that are better than them. Now, I will say this. Go down to Texas. I'm not going to tap into Texas. Not going to tap into Oklahoma. Those schools, the Sooners or Longhorns. But, buddy, I definitely think you should try to get TCU right there in the heart of Texas. When we talk about recruiting in certain places where there is a lot of elite talent, Texas, the entire state is right there. Then if you get TCU, but that helps out a whole lot of things. Now, coming further east, I'm going to go East Coast here, not really go down or up, not really stick it to the old school ways in the mindset. I do believe adding West Virginia or even Pitt would help Penn State have more of a rivalry. Now, I do understand Penn State's better than both West Virginia and Pitt. However, I do also understand that West Virginia football fans are wild, they're crazy, and I think they fit a lot of what the fan bases in the Big Ten are. They love their school. They ride or die for the team. They don't care if they have 2 wins or 10 wins. It does not matter. They're going to ride for them every single day. So West Virginia and Pitt makes sense. Also, very, very quickly, going to go down south. I think the Big Ten and Ohio State would be crazy to not try to go after Miami and Florida State. Absolutely crazy to not try to get those schools. Now, South Florida, Miami makes sense. Tradition at Florida State. And if Florida State keeps going on this path, this upward trajectory, this upward path that they're currently on, and they keep getting better and better and better and better and better, what are we going to be looking at? A team in Florida State that's competing with Ohio State for a playoff spot. Now, there are some that are saying Florida State could be in the playoff this year. I don't know. I need to watch some football. I have not looked into them enough to say I believe that or I don't believe that. I am not going to go that far. But what I will say is this. The sport is better when Florida State is good. Like, just in general. They may say, Jay, the sport's better when everybody's good. Of course it is. But there are certain schools out there that drastically improve the viewership, improve game day, improve Big Noon, improve all of the shows, including this one when they're good. Florida State is one of those schools. When Florida State is good, it's better for everybody involved with the college football. But Miami, look, man, the ACC might go under. The ACC has issues. Come to the Big Ten. You want to get on TV? You want to be on CBS and Fox and NBC? One of the three every single week. Occasionally a Big Ten school, a Big Ten game. You'll be on the Big Ten network, but realistically, you're probably going to be on CBS, Fox, NBC, network television every single week. Hey, man, I think it makes sense. We talk about schools coming to your conference that benefit recruiting. That is what the Hurricanes of Miami, that's what happens if they decided to say, hey, we're going to leave the Atlantic Coast Conference and come and join the boys in the Big Ten Football Conference. Coming up next, I'm going to start a segment, and it's not going to be something that is going to be scheduled. There's every so often a segment of get to know the host. I've been hosting this podcast since 2020, but I don't believe I've done a lot of background or even discuss my fandom about Ohio State, especially in recent years. But I got a new segment, get to know the host, got a topic we'll discuss next year on Locked On Buckeyes. One more show left in the week. Tomorrow, there will be no show on Friday. And as my schedule in life is changing, there will be some pre-recorded shows coming at you tomorrow, and then also Monday and Tuesday to kind of ease myself back into the swing of things. And as married life begins, as I begin my life and journey with my fiance, future wife, there will be some different things changing. And instead of trying to squeeze a recording in, going to have some pre-recorded stuff coming your way over the next few days. get to know the host. It seems like it's fun. I teased this early in the offseason. I was trying to find the right time to dive into some things about me and the host of this podcast and things that make me who I am and why I am the Buckeye football fan, maybe fanatic, that I am as well. When it comes to get to know the host, why don't we just figure out when I began to be an Ohio State Buckeye fan? I was not born in the state of Ohio. I have never lived in the state of Ohio. Born in Fort Wayne, Indiana, moved to Indianapolis, Indiana when I was 6 years old. And in the late 90s, early 2000s, I began to get entrenched in college football. I had been a Colts fan, a Pacers fan. Pacers went to the NBA Finals. Pacers went to the Eastern Conference Finals. So I had that for my basketball fix. Colts were okay. I didn't know them when they went to the AFC Championship game in 95 season. Lost to the Steelers. I wasn't really a fan back then of the Colts. I knew who they were. Wasn't a fan. But, man, when it came to college football, I didn't know no better. I wasn't about to root for the Indiana Hoosiers or Purdue Boilermakers. They were not about to get my pride. Notre Dame Fighting Irish, even though they're in Indiana, ultimately, that's one of those things that where I was from, it was IU or Purdue. Notre Dame was not really talked about as far as your ride or die with that school. So I'm trying to find a college football team, and the next thing I know, there's this guy named Maurice Clarett. It's just red. Now, red is my favorite color, which may have gravitated me towards the Buckeyes at this time. There's a new coach in Jim Tressel. Also, I might add, buddy, I missed the John Cooper years, and I'm glad I missed the John Cooper years because that would have been a not fun experience during my childhood having to deal with, oh, you're really good, but you lost to that school. Oh, you're really good again, but you lost to that school. Why can't you beat them? I did not want to deal with that, and I'm glad I didn't. Maurice Clarett, Craig Krenzel, Will Smith, Michael Jenkins, Mike Doss. Man, those boys were fun to watch. Didn't know who Matt Wilhelm was at the time. Don't think I remember his name when I was a kid, but all I remembered was he was a dog of a linebacker. He was really, really, really good. I believe Chris Gamble was on that team as well, going both ways. Ended up having a big part of the Buckeyes winning the national championship during the 2002 season. But that was it, man. I love Maurice Clarett. I loved it. I remember watching Michael Vick, and I remember watching Ricky Williams, and I remember watching some guys there. But Maurice Clarett got me. He got me at that time. And that was a big reason why. Now, the Buckeyes national championship, that does help. That does pull a youngster into that program, into that fandom. That works out very well. But Maurice Clarett got me. I didn't understand the aftermath of what happened to him. I started to follow Buckeyes, and Quinn Pitcock got drafted by the Indianapolis Colts, my team. Mike Doss, the same thing, drafted by the Colts. And so I knew that. I followed that. Anthony Gonzalez, a few years later, got drafted by the Indianapolis Colts. So I followed some of the Buckeyes that got drafted into the NFL, but I had no idea what was going on with Maurice Clarett, especially when it was like, oh, wait, he got drafted to the Broncos? Wait, why is he not? No, a lot of that did not register and make sense in my mind. I have a better grasp of it right now as an adult. But they got me, man. And I love Tressel. The vest, the way he carried himself, the man that was just the right person for the job, the right man to lead the team. That was Jim Tressel. And I love Tressel, man. We're going to fast forward a little bit to the Terrell Pryor years and Troy Smith, and I loved it. The game, 06, 42-39, I love that as well. And over those years, man, between Tressel getting there and Troy Smith winning the Heisman and the Buckeyes beating the Wolverines in the game 1-2, man, I was there. And all of a sudden, you had a loss to the Gators and a loss to the Tigers in national championships, and ended up going to college. My buddy was a graduate, already had a degree from University of Florida, and so he started talking trash. And I'm like, hey man, I ain't here for that. Like, I wasn't as bold as I am now. Hey man, I'm not here for that. Like, y'all are cold. And it didn't take long to realize, like, Florida was that team. But I love the tradition at Ohio State. I love the period of the kind of pausing, I guess, a little bit, but realizing, hey, we need to make sure we have the right guy for the job. Tressel goes away. In comes Luke Fickell. Interim year, that wasn't going to work. In comes Urban Meyer, a Hall of Famer. You won the Natty. And what happens? My fandom continues to grow. So even though it all started back in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, and I started to realize, oh, there's a team in Ohio, didn't really know where Columbus, Ohio was, had no idea how long of a drive it would have been from a parent's house in Indianapolis to Columbus, Ohio, to the Ohio Stadium. I had no idea. I had no idea that Ohio Stadium is one of the biggest stadiums in college football. All of those things were not in my mind. All I knew was there's a team in college. They're really good. They consistently put guys in the NFL draft. That's what I wanted to be a part of. I loved it. I liked it. I wanted more of it. And the older I get, the more Buckeye football I get put into me, stuck into my veins via an IV. I am here for all things Buckeyes, and I'm here for more Buckeye football. I'm here for my fandom to grow and to get stronger and to figure out different, more things about Ohio State football. I want to know more. The fan, this isn't the host. Yes, you're getting to know the host, but this is the fan in me speaking. I want to learn more. I want to know more. I would love to go to multiple Buckeye football games a year as a fan. Now, monetarily, that's a hefty price tag, and if somebody wants to help your boy out, so be it. But I would love to do that. But ultimately, it was the early 2000s when I became a fan. And I knew about Urban Meyer, but Urban Meyer at Ohio State, I got it. Urban Meyer trusts Ryan Day, I got it. I like that. I like that endorsement. Oh, these really good quarterbacks over the last few years. Oh, I see the changing. I like that as well. That also fits my mind and my brain as far as how I think a quarterback should play the football and what kind of quarterback you need to win a national championship. I love the Ohio State Buckeyes. And I'm glad that as an Ohio State fan, I'm the host of this podcast, Locked on Buckeyes, coming at you 5 times a week during the regular season. You can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. You can send all of your emails to jstevens317@gmail.com. One more show in the week, and ultimately we'll have more of these get to know the host type segments. I'll go over some of my favorite Buckeyes, maybe my favorite quarterback or Buckeye running backs and things like that. Why? Because I think it's good to learn about the host of the show that you enjoy multiple times a week. Locked on Buckeyes is a part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. This has been Locked on Buckeyes here on a Wednesday. One more show to go this week. I'll see you next time.